All right, listener, ready for a deep dive. Today we're going somewhere dark.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about Adolf Hitler,
Oh, wait.
specifically
Mm.
his ethical worldview.
Mm.
How could someone so evil, someone responsible for such horror, operate within, well, any kind of morality at all?
Right, that's the question, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for this, we're looking to Richard Weikart's book, Hitler's Ethic, The Nazi Pursuit of Evolutionary Progress. It's
Okay.
pretty intense.
I bet.
But Weikart's basic argument,
Yeah.
Hitler's actions, they weren't a rejection of ethics, more like a total twisting of them.
It's a paradox for sure.
Totally.
But to understand the Nazis, you have to grasp this. Weikart says Hitler saw himself as like a moral crusader.
Seriously.
Yeah, driven by a higher purpose.
So not just a monster, but someone who thought he was doing good.
Exactly.
That's even more disturbing.
I think so, yeah.
Where did this higher purpose come from?
Well, from this intense, like, unshakable belief in evolutionary progress.
Okay.
For Hitler, evolution wasn't just some theory, you know? It was the driving force in history, the ultimate measure of good and bad. He even believed that God worked through evolution.
So like God was using evolution to what, perfect humanity or something?
In a way, yes.
Wow.
And this is where the term theistic evolutionist comes in. Might sound contradictory,
Yeah, definitely.
but for Hitler, it all fit together. This
Mhm.
is also why he put the collective, like the species, or in his case, the Aryan race, above any individual.
Oh, so individuals didn't matter?
Not really, no. They were expendable.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
Sacrifices for the sake of progress.
Exactly. And that leads right to one of the worst parts of Nazi ideology, this idea of racial struggle and, of course, Aryan supremacy.
Right, so he believed in a hierarchy of races.
Absolutely. And this wasn't just prejudice. It was like the foundation of his whole ethical system.
He actually thought some races were just better. Like that
Yeah.
was scientific fact.
Yes, he did. He took a lot from racial theorists of the time, people who mixed Darwin with racism.
Oh, wow.
Hitler thought history was just this endless fight between races.
Survival of the fittest, but for whole races.
You got it. And in his mind, the Aryans were the most evolved.
Yeah.
They were responsible for everything great in history.
So all the big civilizations like Greece and Rome,
Mhm.
he saw them through this racist lens.
Exactly. And there's this story that really shows how committed Hitler was to all this. He went to this lecture by Hans F.K. Gunther.
Okay.
This guy was a big racial theorist, like a Nordic type.
Right.
The lecture was at the University of Jena back in 1930.
Hmm.
Hitler loved Gunther's work. He actually helped him get that professorship.
So he wasn't just reading this stuff, he was promoting it, putting these guys in power.
Exactly.
That's scary.
It is.
Real deliberate.
Yeah.
So he's got this racial ideology, and then what?
Well, he takes it further. He defines the Volk, the German people, by their blood, their heredity. It wasn't just culture, it was biology.
Wow.
This shaped how he thought about citizenship, about marriage even. And ultimately, it led to the Holocaust.
It's like he took science and made it evil.
Yeah.
But I'm still stuck on the Jews. Like, why them specifically? Just because they were different?
It was way more than that. Hitler didn't just see Jews as different. He saw them as biologically immoral, like they were evil by nature.
So they weren't just different, they were the enemy.
Basically, yeah. He thought their actions were determined by their biology.
So no free will, nothing like that.
Nope.
Just bad genes.
That's the idea.
And it gets worse.
Oh, yeah. He believed that Jews were behind this global conspiracy, to control the world.
Seriously.
Yeah. He thought they were actively trying to weaken the Aryan race, destroy society from within.
That's insane.
It is.
To demonize a whole people like that. But how did this actually play out? Did these ideas become policy?
That's where it gets truly terrifying. His belief in this evolutionary progress led to all sorts of policies, all meant to, quote unquote, improve the human race.
And I'm guessing the results were anything but an improvement.
You can say that.
Okay, well, let's dig into that in part 2. This is some heavy stuff.
Hitler had this idea of lives unworthy of life.
Oh, yeah, that's showing.
People who he thought were holding back the Aryans, keeping them from progressing.
So who exactly did he lump into that category?
It was a pretty broad and horrifying group. You had people with disabilities,
Okay.
mental illnesses, anyone deemed like a social or a criminal,
Right.
and then, of course, Jews.
Of course.
This is what fueled stuff like the T4 program.
Oh, right. The euthanasia program.
Exactly. Targeted disabled people.
Systematically murdering innocents.
Yeah.
All in the name of progress.
That was the idea, as twisted as it is.
Unbelievable.
And it went beyond just euthanasia.
Really?
Hitler was obsessed with controlling, well, reproduction.
Oh, what?
Wanted to weed out any traits he saw as bad.
Like a master race kind of thing?
Yeah, basically. We call that eugenics.
Right. Eugenics.
They passed this law in 1933, the Law for the Prevention of Hereditarily Diseased Offspring.
Catchy.
Led to forced sterilizations, tons of them.
Wow. So how did they get away with this? Was there no pushback?
Some, sure, but the Nazis were good at propaganda.
Right.
And intimidation. Controlled the media, silenced anyone who disagreed, made it dangerous to speak up.
It's like they created a culture of fear.
Yeah, totally. And they were really good at tapping into people's fears.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, Germany was in a bad place. Remember, this is after World War I.
Right.
The economy was a mess, people were unemployed, and they felt humiliated by the war. They wanted someone strong to fix it.
And that's where Hitler came in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He offered these simple solutions to complex problems.
And scapegoats.
Oh, for sure.
But this wasn't just about Germany, was it? Didn't he want more?
Oh, yeah. He had this concept of Lebensraum.
Living space.
Right. That was a big part of his expansionist stuff. It all went back to this twisted Darwinism,
Survival of the fittest for nations.
Exactly. He thought the Aryans needed more land, more territory to thrive.
And that justified conquering the East.
That's what he thought, yeah.
So all the brutality, the things they did in Poland, it wasn't just war, it was.
It was about getting rid of the people who were already there and putting Germans in their place.
Wow.
But here's something interesting.
Yeah.
Even with all this ideology, sometimes reality got in the way.
You mean they had to compromise?
Sometimes, yeah. Like with Mendelian genetics.
Mendel, like the pea plant guy.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with Nazis?
Well, Mendel showed that traits don't just blend.
Okay.
You can have a recessive gene and it pops up later, even if the parents don't show it.
Okay, I'm following.
This was a problem for the Nazis because they wanted these like pure racial categories.
Right. So how'd they deal with that?
It caused a lot of debate. Weikart talks about the whole controversy with
Mischling.
People of mixed ancestry, especially those with Jewish grandparents.
Ah, okay.
Some Nazis wanted to go full Mendel, say that even a tiny bit of Jewish blood makes you not Aryan.
Wow.
Others were more pragmatic. They said, look, if we're too strict, we'll alienate a lot of people. We need them, especially for the war.
So ideology lost to practicality.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that they were being nice. They just needed to stay in power and win the war.
Right, makes sense.
It's like their treatment of people in the East, too.
How so?
At first, Hitler wanted to just empty those areas and put Germans there.
Like totally depopulate them.
Yeah. But then the war dragged on, and they needed those people for labor.
So instead of genocide, it became exploitation.
Pretty much, yeah. Take the Poles, for example.
Okay.
At first, they were going to be killed off, but later they were used as slave labor.
Wow. So even the worst ideologies, they have to bend to reality sometimes. But I still don't get how they got so many people on board.
Right.
Like, were most Germans really Nazis?
That's a tough one. Historians still argue about it.
Okay.
Some people genuinely believed it, for sure, but a lot were probably just scared. Or they went along with it because everyone else did.
Peer pressure, basically.
Kinda, yeah. Plus, you can't forget about propaganda.
Right, Goebbels and all that.
Exactly. They were masters of it. Rallies, radio, films, newspapers, you name it, they controlled the message.
And demonized their enemies.
Oh, absolutely.
So they created this whole world where their version of reality was the only one allowed.
And in that world, they convinced people that this horrible stuff was not just true, but good.
It's scary how powerful propaganda can be.
It really is, especially when it plays on your fears and prejudices.
It makes you wonder if any society is really safe from that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But let's shift gears a bit. For part 3, let's talk about how the Nazis twisted language itself. It's just wild how they took words like, duty or sacrifice, even community, and made them, evil.
It's the perfect example of weaponized language.
Yeah, totally.
They took good ideas, twisted them with their racial ideology.
Like sacrifice wasn't about helping others, it was about the Aryan race.
Exactly. And love, forget about universal love. It was all about this Aryan ideal.
So anyone who didn't fit that ideal, they were
Basically
just,
worthless.
yeah.
They weren't just pushing policies, they were changing the definition of right and wrong.
Wow.
Morality itself became corrupted. Genocide, oppression, it was all spun as virtue.
So they weren't murderers, they were purifiers.
Exactly. They weren't invaders, they were securing living space.
It's amazing how language can hide the truth.
And the scary thing is, it wasn't all just a trick.
Really?
A lot of them really believed this stuff. They thought they were creating a new moral order.
Based on evolution and racial struggle.
Right. They were true believers in their own twisted way.
It's almost harder to grasp than if they were just, lying.
I think so, yeah.
It makes it all the more disturbing.
And that's why it's so important to, understand where these ideas came from.
Weikart talks about that, right?
Yeah, he traces it back to the 1800s.
To those thinkers who mixed Darwin with racial hierarchy.
Right. So you have Darwin, who wasn't a racist himself.
But his ideas got, hijacked.
Exactly. Guys like Ernst Haeckel.
Who was that?
He was this German biologist, really popularized Darwin in Germany.
Okay.
But he also had some really messed up ideas about human evolution.
Like what?
Oh, he believed in this rigid racial hierarchy, Europeans on top, everyone else below.
Oh, no.
He even thought we should kill disabled infants.
Seriously?
Yeah, he called it natural selection.
It's terrifying how science can be twisted.
It really is, and it shows how careful we have to be with any ideology, even if it claims to be scientific.
You can't just take things at face value.
Right, you gotta question things, challenge authority.
And stand up for basic human dignity no matter who someone is.
Absolutely. So this deep dive into Hitler's ethics, it's been rough, but important.
Definitely. We've seen how even smart people can fall for dangerous ideas.
And how science can be twisted for evil.
And how language can be used to hide terrible truths.
It's a reminder that the fight for tolerance, for justice, it never really ends.
We can't just assume things will be okay. We have to actively fight for what's right.
And it starts with education, with understanding how these ideologies work.
Weikart's book is great for that.
It is. Anyone who wants to really get this, they should check it out.
Hitler's Ethic, yeah. It's heavy stuff, but essential.
Before we finish, though, one last thought.
Okay.
If Hitler could twist ethics to justify his crimes, what does that say about morality itself? How do we make sure this never happens again?
Wow, that's a question we all have to think about.
Yeah, no easy answers there.
It's about being aware, being vigilant, fighting for a better world.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, listener. It's been a journey, but hopefully an enlightening one.